Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome you all again to the 72nd lecture of Calcutta Comparatists 1919. And for your kind information, Calcutta Comparatists 1919 is an independent forum for research scholars of humanities and social sciences. It carries the legacy of the academic study of Indian languages and literature envisioned by Sir Ashutosh Mukherjee and introduced in 1919 at the University of Calcutta. So that's why we have used 1919 along with the name Calcutta Comparatist, which is the name of our forum. And the whole idea we have sort of take from this history and platform for sharing initially research interest and ideas. And for now, we are organizing online lectures on various interdisciplinary topics, as well as we are publishing online biography series with the help of our most beloved Dada Obhinava Moitro. And we are also planning to do some more workshop and other sorts of things for our for near future. So anyway, without further ado, I would like to start today's talk by formally introducing Professor Mohan Kant Gautam, and he will be introduced by our founder member Artrika Ganguly. Professor Mohan Kant Gautam's topic is identity problems of the Indian diaspora residing in the Caribbean countries. And now I would like to request Artrika to formally introduce Professor Mohan Kant. Back to you, Artrika. Thank you.
Thank you, Pratim. A very good evening to all our audience and participants, and a very good afternoon to Professor Gautam. It is the 72nd lecture. As you know, our last lecture was cancelled, so this is the 72nd lecture of Calcutta Comparatists 1919. As Pratim has already introduced our forum and introduced our speaker's topic, I'll introduce our speaker. Professor Mohan K. Gautam is currently the President and Professor, University of East and West, the Netherlands, and Global Vice President, Sun Moon University of South Korea. He is also the Chairman of International Union of Anthropological and Ethnological Sciences, International Scientific Commission on Museums and Cultural Heritage, affiliated to UNESCO. Simultaneously, he is the President of European Hindi Samiti, President of Dutch Hindi Samiti, President and Chairman of many other international organizations. Sir completed his D.Litt in 1979 in Structural Anthropology with Indology from Leiden University. He was also the Senior Associate Professor in Indology, including Hindi, Structural Anthropology, and other New Indo-Aryan languages. He was also a visiting professor at Oslo University, Norway, and in India at Ranchi University. He had delivered lectures in various universities like Delhi University, New York, University of New York, in various universities in South Africa, Europe, Mexico, and many more, and in Southeast Asian countries as well. Sir is a polyglot because he knows many languages, some of the Austroasiatic languages, some Indo-Aryan, which is special references to Hindi dialects. He also knows several European languages like Dutch, Danish, Norwegian, English, Flemish, Russian, and German. His specialization areas are Hindi language, grammar and literature, and New Aryan languages, museumology, anthropology, Indology, South Asian studies, etc. He had under his name more than 35 books, more than 140 articles published, and many others, several articles and published and book edited chapters published in various anthologies. Some of the awards he has received are he received very national, European, and international recognitions. He was also present at the Vishwa Hindi Samman by Dr. Karan Singh during the 10th Vishwa Hindi Sammelan in New York. He is considered not only as an internationally well-known anthropologist, but he's also an Indian diaspora expert. Sir, thank you for joining us today. Thank you so much. We have been long talking about your lecture, and finally we are here today, and we are delighted with your presence. We are so honored to have you on our forum. Professor, you can start your lecture. This virtual floor is all yours now. Thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank your 1990s this Comparative Calcutta Forum or Foundation, and where you have done a lot for the students and for the people. I would like to thank you especially because you contacted me and became a part of your this lecture series. Now today I have been speaking something very different in a way. You could look at any diaspora communities anywhere in the world, but the problem is which I am working and I am facing for the last 50 years, and that is, what is Indian diaspora? And Indian diaspora, this is the one thing which I would like to discuss here. Second, Indian diaspora has to be seen with a reference to identity formation. How do the people define their identity and can say what they are? So, I mean, these two things are connected. And of course, within the Indian diaspora, you had other problems in which way people became conscious that they have something to do with India, Indian culture, and can they connect themselves to the other countries also living in the other islands and the countries from the cultural point of view. These are the questions which I would be dealing. I would not be going through in more statistics. I could give, but then it takes a lot of time, and then it would be difficult to note it down. I can always provide you afterwards. Now, if we have to look at the Indian diaspora, there were three Indian diasporas. First Indian diaspora was around 15th, 16th century during the time of the Mughals, and it was from mostly from Punjab, Delhi, Gujarat, and some parts maybe of Maharashtra also. They were called, as I say, the business diaspora or the trading diaspora. These people were also called Multani people, but there were also Shikarpur and other areas were also there. There were three sort of routes to go to Central Asia or to the Middle Eastern countries. Either one has to go from the Peshawar side, or the other was from the Indian Ocean side via Iran and so. And third was Hindu Kush going north to the Kyrgyzia and from Uzbekistan entering into the Central Asia and even going until Russia. I mean, if you know the lake where the Baku is located as a capital, if you go very north, then you would see there is a river, the Volga, which is connecting to that Caspian Sea. So there was also another, let's say, vicinity of Indians. Even they had the temples and everything. I have got even photographs. But I could not go there. I have been near to the Baku. There was another a place which was considered for the Hindus especially as a pilgrimage center like Banaras. So their idea was to give the money to the people, and they were called the sort of hundi, sort of documents that by showing the documents you can get the money and you could help the the kings or the other people who wanted to have money. That was the first diaspora. But then this diaspora did not continue for a long time, because then the Britishers came to India. But generally people used to live for 20, 30 years, even more. And because I have been to the areas where I have seen the places where one of the last place which I went was near Baku, Songmait it's called, where it was until 1800 remained as a museum, and now after 1800 became as a museum. And there you could see that how people used to live, and there are the temples. And the very interesting thing is that people say suddenly they found out some flames were coming from the earth. So people thought, the Hindus, that maybe the Shiva is appearing. So they started worshipping Shiva. But there were also the Parsians, which we have in Bombay. They are all the Zoroastrians. They believe in the fire. So they said, okay, you make your temple, and it would also be for us as fire worship. So they gave the money, and the temples started. In that Songmai, about 60 people could stay there. It was one of the biggest centers. Anyway, but it did continue, but when the Britishers and others came, it was disrupted. Now the second Indian diaspora, as now we are calling, it was after this abolition of slavery of 1833. Of course, earlier were also Indians were sent to the Caribbean and other countries, and because the Portuguese were also there at that time, and Dutch were also there. Even certain Indian slaves from Bengal area, I mean Indians they are called, they were used as slaves and sold in Europe, and they stayed there. So this was the second diaspora, which became in other countries, because in 1834 the real diaspora started, and it was called so-called indenture system diaspora. But the basic idea that you need not to work as a slave. You work for certain time, and then you are free. So in 34, for the first time, it started with Mauritius. The first ship, which was arranged from Calcutta, and from Calcutta, the first ship had not many people, I think 30 or something like that. They were mostly the tribals of Bengal or Bihar, like Munda, Oraon, Santals, etc. Anyway, it continued, and then Hindus also came into the picture. And so this migration, or it is not called migration, it was called emigration. They went to Mauritius, Caribbean countries, African countries, and Fiji was very last one. I mean, Fiji came very late. So that started this emigration. Now my problem has been how people define themselves. Because in the early years, they went to a certain place which was completely different. They did not know, no one told. Only the question was that when they were recruited in Bengal, at the time there was the Bengal presidency, the basic idea was that these people can come and work in plantations and then help the colonizing countries like the France, Germany, not Germany, Germany came later, the Dutch, and even Spanish. So these countries, some people were recruited, and they were called at that time agents, or Indian gave them the name Arkatis. Now, Arkatis were trying to collect people, robust people who could do some work, but the problem was there were the bluffs that you are going to an island where you will earn double, and you can be the head of the gang, and after some time you can come back, and then you can have a lot of money. That was the basic idea, and on that recruitment, the agents or the Arkatis were given special funds for the recruitment per person. Now, another thing is here, the ladies did not go in the beginning, they went afterwards, because first ships, they did not have any ladies, only afterwards. Anyway, so this is the way they started, and biggest problem for them was at that time, this country does not have all sorts of Indians which they used to have in India. They were the black Africans who have been slaves. There were also the red Indians, because I'm talking about the Caribbeans, and they were living in the jungles because they ran away. They were prosecuted by the colonial power. So that became the problem. Language. What language they could speak, this was also a big problem. They could not speak even their own language, because once they were collected, as they were called afterwards, Girmitia, who had gone through some agreement, and they had to go to the magistrate to say yes or put their thumb that they are going outside India with their own will. Anyway, that was the way it is started. But the very interesting thing is that once they came, they did not belong to one language group, because in India, North India, Bengal presidency at the time, there were many group of peoples, and who were divided in a way culturally, that they were speaking their own mother tongue, like Bhojpuri, Mathili, or even Nepali. Or within, I think, Bengal also there were the differences. And maybe people from Odisha, because Odisha was also a part of Bengal presidency at that time. So these people had a big problem how to speak and how to understand each other. But anyway, there's one thing, when the 1800 in Calcutta, the college started, and in that college they started Hindi or Hindustani or Urdu as a lingua franca, and the British were using that language. So some people could speak and communicate. But once they came here in Caribbean countries, problem started. Now, I should tell you here that the first emigration was to Mauritius, 1834, and in 1838, the second emigration was to at that time it was called British Guyana. And afterwards, about 1845, around that time, then the other countries like Trinidad, Tobago, Jamaica, St. Lucia, and Grenada, their people were sent. But since they were all living differently in different islands, they could not meet each other, only they were the ships. And the shipping gave them some sort of a feeling of fictive kinship, brotherhood. So they were called the Jahaji Bhai or Jahaji Behen. Those who stayed in one place, they tried to develop that the Jahaji Bhai or Jahaji Behen should help each other, and they did help each other. But now the problem starts here, when they can go to India. it was not sure. They said you might go after 5 years maybe, because the contract of indenture system started only after 1850, around that time. So they had to stay, and then once the owners of the plantations would say, now we need the new group, and then these people would go back, and then the new group from Calcutta. But in the meantime, from Bombay and Calcutta and Madras also started shipping to these countries. Now, the biggest problem for them was socialization. Let's take Suriname. Suriname was very late, 1873, and 1873, within 2 years, 73 or 74, there were about 15 plantations where the Indians were sent. They were around 3,000. And these 8 ships who went to Suriname, they had also got a lot of problems, because when people became ill, when they could not talk, there were no hospitals, there were no nurses and doctors. Generally, those doctors and nurses who could not continue their study, who could not pass the examinations in European countries, they were sent there. So many people died. So within 2 years in Suriname, I am giving an example. When the 8 ships moved there were 15 plantations far, far away, and the Indians were not allowed to meet each other. And what happened? Around 20% Indians died there. They died because there were no interpreters, there were no hospitals, and they were treated like a beast, And when anything went wrong, they were put immediately to the jails. The same thing happened in Mauritius, earlier. So what British government did at that time, and also the Dutch government, they tried to work it out that unless until the country becomes sort of social well-being for the emigrants, they stop the shipping. And sometimes the ships were stopped for 5 years, because at the time the indenture system had already started. So people felt, now we cannot go back. And what we should do? So they tried to marry, because they were also mostly the young people, and they had their own feelings, and they thought maybe we can't go back. So first they did was try to reconstruct, revise their culture and religious values, norms, and they tried to settle there that we have to talk each other in our languages, and with this language we can move further. Now there is started something, and that is, when people are living, let's say 15 plantations and far distance, and they are not allowed to meet each other, they were giving some sort of coupons. But anyway, they tried to mix each other, and then they started reconstructing their culture. And this culture was that if we can keep our culture alive, and once we go back, then we can be the part of India. But there is another thing started, that they were all having their caste system, because they were coming from India, from the castes, and that was a big problem. But as you go now, and if you ask any indentured labor descendant and ask him, he said, no, we don't believe in caste, we don't have caste system. I can understand, because the roots were lost. But on the other hand, these people do carry their symptoms of caste system, and that became a symbolic way to live on. Now, I'm giving some idea. The second, I will move further, but the third one was after 1950, when the Indians went, and they are called NRI, once they went outside for study, for entrepreneurship, other things, they had their families in India. They had the family connections. But compared to the indentured labor system, they did not have any connection with India because there was no communication. If they used to write letters, I do have some letters, then people would write them back, please come, but they could not go because there were two ways. Either they should pay the money to go back, or they should live for the whole contract, or if they can have another contract, then they can be given some funds and land so that they can inhabit in that country. So mostly returned, and some of people stayed there, and because they got a land. But now the problem comes here that when the women were not so many, it started problem because family has to move, but the family could not be created. Now I am trying to look at here how could they define afterwards, after let's say 1916, when the emigration was stopped. There's another thing, they were given the derogatory symbols on the names. They were all called coolies. They were not called by the name of by no coolie come here, coolie good. So that was another idea they wanted to get out of it because there was not a respectful way to live with them. Now we have to understand this especially indentured labor system, which stayed in Caribbean countries, because after 1950, those people who went there, there's a different. Like the Mittal company, who is an iron owner, iron steel owner. They started their first company in Trinidad, and then now they are very rich and they are doing quite a lot of work there. So I'm not talking about the Indian diaspora after 1950, because after the constitution things were changed. What I am trying to tell you that the first of all, the problem was at that time when they were living in India, India was not a one nation. I'm saying it very clearly, neither culturally nor linguistically. Indians were living at the time in the states, and India was divided. Only I think Patel tried to unite India. So that was the condition of India or at that time. So there was no homogeneity. There were the migrations within India. People were going and working some money temporarily and coming back, and that's why in villages you started the folk lyrics or songs like birhas, etc., that the wife is waiting for the husband to come back, and then symbolically, like a bird, she is alone and she is waiting. Anyway, that was the system that culturally things started. But now my question is, these people have already settled there, and but are they real Indian? I mean, this I am trying to look at it. Even within India, let's take the Indian example. If you talk to someone in Delhi, Calcutta, Bombay, wherever, whichever the place you think, to talk to a person, and you ask him, from where do you come from? He would not say that I am from the same land where you come from? No, he would say, I am Punjabi, I am Tamil, I am this, I am that. So all these regional names, linguistically created names would come, and he would be telling about this. I mean, like, give an example, this Sikh agitation, it is only in Punjab. And the Punjab name is coming more and more. It's not about India, they're not telling, because it's the only localized place within India, Punjab. But anyway, another thing is, which is I think we have to keep in mind, Indians only say that they are Indian once they go out of India, because when there is a security checkup, they have to show the passport document, which are the Indian passport created by the Indian government. So homogeneity is neither culturally, nor linguistically, and not even structurally. Because generally, what happens when people look at the structure, and the structure you can only look in points of view, from the points of view, one very good institution, and that institution is called the family. And within the family, when family has to move, you have to think in terms of marriage alliances. I mean, in India, marriage alliances, or when there's a marriage, wedding, then there are so many things to be worked out. First of all, from the kinship point of view, if they are the Hindus, they will not marry, at least officially it is said, 5 generations within the father side and 3 generations within the mother side. Actually, they do say 7 to 5, because I anthropologically can reduce it to 5 to 3, because otherwise they will say it's an incest, the blood remains the same and we cannot marry. Now this is a system, this is a structural system which the Indian indentured laborers could not take with them, because the family did not go, and that's why they were free. The only thing was that those people from the Brahmin caste, or Varna, or Kshatriya Varna, they became known in shipping. And so they changed their name when they were recruited, but they took the lead in dealing with the folk Hindu religion, folk Muslim religion, or even Christianity. And this happened there. So what I'm trying to say is this: homogeneity was not in India, not in kinship, because in India, if you have to think in terms of kinship, then you have to think in terms of two things: marriages, and then the kinship in form of succession. Because then there is a Shraddha ceremony, I do not know how to translate into English, where the sapindas are, offered to the elderly people who are deceased. This is a part of a structure, and that's why castes have been in India endogamous. Only when there is a marriage, then it should be the exogamous. Now, this system they could not continue in many countries. That's why they say that we do not have caste system. But I have seen the registers. People always wanted to change their names, and change their names means trying to get a higher status. Many people became the Singh. Some people even carried the names of Brahmins, of Vaishyas. I mean, this process did continue in earlier stage. But they were not thinking themselves that they are real Indians, because there were also the reasons, and the reasons were, like we can see in India. India is a big country, and idea to be an Indian is also not very difficult in India to understand. I mean, there are Adivasi, there are all sorts of people. India is a multilateral society. And to understand India means you have to understand the multilateral society. And the same thing happened in the Caribbean countries. It was the difficulties in the languages, the policies, like there have been three policies. When the Britishers took the Indian to the plantations, they had a different policy. It was also in India. Britishers always said that there is a rule, and if you follow a rule, you are an Indian, you are free, you do whatever you want to do. The same thing was with the Danish people. They had more or less the same type of philosophy, and the same was the policy with the Dutch people. French, Spanish, Portuguese, they have a different policy. Their feeling was that you have to be first French, you have to be first Portuguese and Spanish, you must know their language, and if possible, convert your religion into Christianity. And that's why the French-speaking colonies in Caribbean, if you ask them who you are, they say, we are French. This is their term. They would not say, but once you start asking, but you look like Indian. Yes, yes, our forefathers came from India, but we are different. This idea they would give very clearly. And of course, within the Indian group, South Indian groups are still keeping some of the customs where the North Indians have been looking at differently. They have been, in a way, assimilated, integrated with the local cultures. Now, having understood this, now the problems which I'm trying to start here, or to tell you, as the languages were many, and they wanted to have some sort of a communicative language, they did use a word which is known in the social sciences, coinization. That means using the vocabulary of other languages, and maybe some mother tongue ideas. And this coinization started, like, let's say, in the Caribbean country, Suriname is the only country where some sort of a Bhojpuri influence you would see. They would not say it's a Bhojpuri, they would say it's a Suriname language, but you have a mixture of Avdhi, Maghi, Bhojpuri, and other languages, and also the local languages like Dutch and the Creole language of Shenang Tango. Now, this is a different country. Look at Mauritius. Mauritius speaks also some sort of Bhojpuri, because they are very close to the north east UP and north south of Bihar, where you have this Bhojpuri area. But still, in the grammatical system, there are the difference. Like, they would always use the transitive work like hamne, but transitive would be used maybe in transitive form, where hamne would never be used in Suriname. So what I'm trying to say that these differences were minimized by coinization, but the problem remained, and which is still. When after 1916, these people tried to reconstruct the Indian culture, and there the problem started. The Hindu community, like the Arsamajis and Sanatanis, they started their own foundations. Muslims also started foundation. But the problem started later, nowadays after 50s or 60s, let's put up. The problem was there were two social linguists. One was Ferguson, around 59, he did some work, and in this work was important, and he tried to work out the idea of what's it called, diglossia. And then he said, I mean, actually, it was actually explained by a German in 63, Wenrich. That idea was that the language shift is due to a higher or lower grade of languages. That means the local language, whatever they used to speak, was always considered from the other main languages as a lower language, inferior languages. The other person who came, and I agree with him, and this was a Fishman, and Fishman tried in 1967, and diglossia he elaborated, and he said the differences are only in terms of bilingualism and the roles which are used. You cannot say it's a lower or higher. And I think that has been the idea. Of course, Durkheim, one of the famous sociologists from France, he gave certain ideas, and those ideas were taken by sociologist Calcutta Comparatists and Mons in France, and that's why two things developed: the role theory and the structural functionalism of Calcutta Parson, or you could say Malinowski, with Radcliffe Brown was also interested. Of course, American anthropologists Boas and Sapir, etc., they had a different way. They stressed mostly on culture aspect, whereas the British school gave a lot of thoughts on the institutional aspect. But that's different, and that's why the structural aspect was taken by the French. The base was the Durkheim, and the Lévi-Strauss was the latest one, who also died recently, well, a couple of years ago. So what this coinization developed sort of a medium of communication, and the problem started when these countries, whether it was Jamaica or whether it's Guyana or Suriname, I'm not using the Grenada and Jamaica, and even Indians went to Cuba also, and Belize. I'm not talking about them. I'll say something about them afterwards. What they did when many Muslim, what is called, the people went there and to visit these Indians, they had also given some different ideas. Indians, when they went there, I'm using Indians because otherwise I will have to use the Indians of Trinidad, Indians of Mauritius, because that prefix they have always used it. The problem started, the Hindus started sort of revival of folk religion, folk Hindu religion. Recently someone wrote that a person's home is decided by the statue, a murti, which I differ, because people are trying to develop a religious ethnicity. Ethnicity cannot be religious. Anyway, so what I'm trying to say it here, that the communication purposes, they developed their ideas, but then biggest problem was, and that was the local communities, and one has to look at how do they looked at them, because Indians never had any territory. They created the cultural boundary, they created the religious revivalism in terms of values. But the Indians who went there to these colonies, there the problem started. For example, the Hindu priests or rituals who went there, especially from Sanatan, they said that ritual could only be conducted if they follow certain manuals produced in India. So if you go to South Africa, if you go to Guyana, if you think that there's not a single way of doing the thing, because everyone is trying to work out their own way. There was only one person in 1910, he went to Guyana and States and Suriname. He did not talk about the Hindu. He only said to the Indians there, keep your language of communication, and he said it should be Hindi. This man was afterwards prisoned in India because he was the man around 1910 or 15. The first paper was created in United States. It was called the Ghadar, and he was one of the founder of that paper also. His name was Bhai Parmanand. Anyway, so religious ideas were not propagated, but those who propagated the religious idea, they created conflict and confusion among the Hindus. The same thing happened with the Muslims, because when these people went to Guyana or Mauritius, at that time there was only one India, the British India. Pakistan and Bangladesh. Bangladesh came very late. And India, they appeared in 1947. Now, what happened? I have myself seen it in a way long ago. But then I was given the explanation, it happens, we do it, but it is wrong. I said, why? When they go to namaz on Friday, generally in India, people would look at to the west because Makkah and Medina, they are in the west. Those Indians who went from India to Caribbean countries, they thought, the Muslims I'm talking, that the Makkah and Medina, they are in the west. So they started worshipping or doing rituals, namaz, etc., keeping, facing their postures, etc., towards west. And then people came, it is not possible, you can't do it, because Makkah and Medina, they are in east. So, certain things were given and they were then also changed. Christianity is a different form of faith. Faith was, and of course you have Presbyterians and Lutheran. They were also in India, but Canada also did a lot there. And so what happened with all these systems which started here? The problem was, what is the Indian model, how they could call what they are. And I must tell you, they did create their miniature Indias, and I have seen they would have the red flags outside, jhandis, and then you can find out they're the Hindus very easily. And then the Kalimai temples were also there, which actually did develop a feelings among the African also. And that's why African start, like I have seen in Guyana near the capital, there is a temple. Many people, and they also use the term, I mean the flex there. A very interesting thing is here that because of Kalimai became the center for the blacks, I mean Africans, I'm sorry, I should not have used the word black, Africans and Hindus, they became more or less very close to each other. But then something happened very interesting. As I started in the beginning, that the women were always very, very they were not many, and so the marriages started, intermarriages started with the other groups. Other groups were the two groups were there, the Chinese and Africans, and they were the marriages. I mean, let's take an example of Guyana. Guyana during the 19th, it was also a British colony because there were three Guyanas, the British Guyana, French Guyana, and the Dutch Guyana. Dutch Guyana has become the Suriname, and French Guyana is towards the eastern side, and the west side is the Guyana, which has Venezuela as the next country to the west. Now, Guyana had a more problem, similarly like Jamaica, and the problems were that there were at least 6 type of people, and they were considered as racial groups. They were the Indians in 1960, I'm talking about. There were 51% at that time, Africans 43%, whites, that means the British, 3%, including Portuguese and Chinese were also there. And there were the Red Indians, which was very small group, Akawaivo, Patamona, Arekuna, Makusi, Waiwai, Wapisi, Ara. So these are the names. And people started marrying whites, very seldom, but mostly Africans and Chinese. And this is something which I want to tell you, which has also created lots of problems. In Guyanese culture, there is a tendency, which is now had become open, but at that time, 30, 40 years ago, it was not even told. Intermarriages were there, and the children born of those intermarriages were called bastard, Douglas. And the problem started that, as I told to you, that the women were less. So Guyana, if you look at Guyana's problems were even worse. And worse in the sense, there was a jealousy, fightings, suicide, stealing women, adultery, elopement, etc. There is a case that one of the women, they found out women were less. She married at least 6 times, and she got the money and she was moving left and right. It was a court case. So the shortage of women created this problem. That's why the interracial marriages arranged. Now, as I talked to about Guyana, in 1838, only 6, when it started, 6 women were there. And only between 1845 and 87, average was about 32, but they were sometimes very less. Trained art was 35%, Jamaica 41%. And then mostly the Hindu marriages were not legalized very, very late. And there started the problem. And especially in Guyana, the racial conflict between the Guyanese Africans and Guyanese Indians became very, very difficult. I mean, during the 50s and 60s, the turmoil and the riots were there. Of course, afterwards from New York, Jagan came and he became the prime minister. But there was another friend of him. They were from the same party, Burnham. But then he took the side of Africans, and the United Kingdom and United States also took his side, and Chagan was elected, but he was thrown out. And because Jagan was so-called Indian, the Indians felt miserable, and then the Burnham's government made military recruitment compulsory. Even the Hindu girls were recruited, and parents were not allowed to go there. And what happened in that sense, the girls came with the babies, etc. Was an extremely bad situation. There is, at that time, I have got a report came from the international church. It's called the International Church, and there it says very clearly that Guyana has become problem. And what is the now the identity? How do they define those who got married? They have then double identity. They can also be African, they could also be Indian, and they could also be third identity. They could also be Guyanese. So territory is not there, culture is there. And then, of course, Guyana lost the language also, because I do remember in the villages still, Trinidad also, hot, they say, the market, weekly market. Very, very elderly people do speak some words, but certain words of India have been adopted and used in their languages, which is a mixture of Creole and English. This I have seen it. Of course, not much research have been done there. It would have been better to have research in this line also. Now, if I compare with Fiji, it's a different story. Fiji, Trinidad, and Mauritius did keep the Indian relations very well. And sometimes they would say we are Indian. But the problem is how to define the group, how to define their Indianness. And I think there are two concepts which we have to think very clearly. Home. How do they define their home? And how do they define their belongingness? Since they are born in Caribbean countries, in those islands, they would of course say that this is the country where my house is, home is, where I have studied, where I have played with the children, and this is my surroundings. And I feel very happily that I belong to St. Lucia or Grenada or Guyana, whatever name we can use it. But the belongingness, do they really Indian? Sometimes Indians will go there, they say, oh, it's like India, which is not correct. Because they have adopted within 150 years new cultural traits of the local culture. And that's why they use it in their languages also. So I think you have to see that the If we talk about the Indianness, then the Indianness is a different type of concept there, and it has to be seen from their point of view. I'll give you an example. There were the people in Jamaica and Grenada, and suddenly, after I think it was 1910, yeah, the colony of Belize. Belize is south of Mexico, on the eastern coast. It was a British colony. They wanted more indentured laborers. So these people, those Indians who were in these other areas, they had finished their contract, and they thought we will go there and we will work there and maybe we can settle there. But it was not allowed. So what happened? Many people went to Cuba. They learned the language, and then they developed some sort of Cubanese Indian associations. There was a person called, I think Jagdish, his name was. He was from Delhi. He could speak very good Hindi, and he could communicate and organize good management within the Indian community. But at a certain moment, they were not allowed to go to Belize. So they stayed there. They also worked in the sugar plantations in Cuba. They learned the languages slowly. Their name changed, and it became the Spanish name. And then there is a custom also there, and that custom, I think, people have to know, and which is that if an Indian marries to a Spanish girl in Cuba, then the girl will not go to the Indian boy's house. No, the boy has to go and live with her in her house. There is no research. Still, I'm sure there would be remnants which could be understood. We do not know. People don't say we are Indian, because the whole concept of Indianness is lost. I know in Jamaica was a big problem, because there were the 8 harbors, and British always wanted to bring Indians to not to the same harbor, but all the 8 harbors. Basic idea is that Indians can be integrated with the Africans, and in that way they would have some sort of Guyanese nation where they can come together. And the basic idea was there should be the marriages. It did happen, but long ago, a friend of mine, I think 40 years ago, he went there. He was a medical man to do some medical work in Jamaica. His name was Dr. Gerg. And he found out many things, and he started some sort of revival of Indianness among the Indians. Now, if you look at another example like Guadeloupe, which is a French colony, mostly are there the South Indians. South Indians did keep their traditions compared to the North Indians. But they are now there is a sense that they also want to know Hindi, and that's why students come spending their own money to Trinidad and stay there for years and learn Hindi and go back. So things are coming, but there is a division. I am a French Indian. I am a British Indian from the point of view of Trinidad or Guyana, or I am a Dutch Indian from Suriname, or could also be that I am a Spanish Indian. Now, these are the ideas. which I think we have to see and do something. It could be done very easily, because one thing is sure, that they like Caribbean countries, or so-called Indians, if I may use the word, they like the Bollywood. Bollywood films, they cannot speak them, but they hum them. I remember I was somehow they're very friendly to Chedi Jagan of Guyana, and I went to see him when he became the Prime Minister. And he also came to Netherlands. Sometime in his free time, listen together, he used to hum the Indian songs, melodies. And he sometimes used to go, if he liked the film, 3 times to see the film. So there have been some connections. And then, of course, pilgrimage, India is considered a big pilgrimage country. People would go, or people go as a tourist. But the problem is, they have also their roots, and there sometimes it becomes difficult. Now the Bajpayee government and this government may be trying to develop some sort of a process where the Indians can go and look at their roots. But then another, from Indian points of view, that these people, they have a what's called card of PIO, or now the Indian government wants to give NRI. Problems are these Indians are not treated as in Indians in India. They are considered, oh, they may be Indian, but they do not belong to us. And it happens in the villages where they went there to Bihar, or even to Bengal, or to UP. People first thought, oh, these people, why they have come here? Do they want our land? That's one thing. If not land, what can we do for them? So if the good relations are there, then the people can become friends. Otherwise, there is always a sort of idea of fear. Maybe what do they want, and which way, what we can do. Because those earlier forefathers who moved to those areas, maybe their villages are changed, or maybe under the drought, or I don't know what, something happened in India, but there should be a proper system. We should find them out. So this is another way. And that's why when India government started that the NRI and can participate in Indian elections, the PIO, now they are also called NRI, they said no, we do not know about India. And this is a very good example. Like I did a research on the Netherlands and Germany. Many youngsters of fourth generation of Indians who have come here and stayed here, they say we do not know India. Anderson's idea that India has become imaginary India. And so a TV station has been opened in Germany to give an idea what India they should think. But they say we are Germans, we are born here, we are brought up here. So what I'm trying to say, the basic concept that they all are Indian is a wrong concept. They may have some relations with India from their forefathers, but they are different. And I think if this idea we can have, then I think we can have new researches in new areas. But we should also tell our students, they should also know the languages of the people. Because without knowing the language of the people becomes, like for example, language is not very difficult. Like let's take Suriname. The Creole speaks Shenang Tongo. Grammatically, it's very easy to speak and learn this language. They are unlike the Indian languages, North Indian languages. But you know, many I have only taken the area of Caribbean. There are also the Adivasis who went to Caribbean. What happened to them? No one knows. Mauritius, there are about the latest statistics told to me about more than 20,000 Adivasis. They stayed there. Now, Adivasi group or the Janjati group, a tribal group, is a different type of group. What happened to their cultural traits, religious traits? No one has done any research. I mean, these are the new ideas where we can learn a lot, and our students can give new light, because after all, India believes, and so we all believe, we are all humanitarian. Rigveda always say Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, but we have to develop that Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam feeling also within India. We are still suffering, seeding with this problem of social hierarchy, etc. Now the social hierarchy has become a politicized social hierarchy. COVID is going on in India. Instead of giving help for the COVID people, sorry to say this, I have to say anyway, people are busy in looking at the political system, political parties. We have to win. I mean, the same thing what Donald Trump tried in United States. We have to think differently. We have to develop in India, which the other people do have, but not all. A medical insurance for all the Indians, uh, social uplifting with pensions, etc., so that all people can get some money and they can remain intact. They can feel they are the part of the country. So many things can be done and we can learn, but we have to work out from the Indian point of view. I think, Madam Ganguly, time is running out. I think I have spoken what I wanted to say. I could, of course, give more ideas on other countries also, but it will take more time, maybe some other time. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Professor Gautam. Thank you so much. This was a very informative session, and especially for me, as I'm working on endangered laborers, and also Pratim is working on various countries of Southeast Asia. This was it's an amazing session for both of us, and I think for our viewers as well. Professor, we can take some questions from the audience because I see there is some questions in the YouTube chat box.
Definitely.
Thank you, sir. Pratim is asking some questions as well. Pratim has said in the YouTube chat box, Professor, thank you for such an interesting presentation. I would like to know more about the reasons behind the return to the Caribbean islands upon completion of their contract. Some Caribbean plantations. Can you shed some light on their circumstances upon return? Why they chose to re-indenture and return to a plantation environment?
Now, there are only two things that many people did return to India, but from Indian point of view, is not so much information is known, except there was a professor. He did write something, but what is more important is that when the shipping was terminated in 16, and people went to their villages, they want to go back to the plantations again, because they were sort of plundered by their own families. They were taken all, they were without any money. So they came back to Calcutta, and sometimes they worked near the harbor. There was a coolie colony, and they used to earn some money, but they all wanted to go. I remember a friend of mine He is retired. He was also a professor. His, I think, father was, I think. He went to South Africa, but from South Africa, when he went back to India, he wanted to come back. And then I think he was sent not to South Africa, because the ship to Trinidad and Tobago. So there are certain statistics by which we can find out who came here and what came here. But this another research field, not much has been done. And that's why I think if we can do something, it could give some new light in our history of emigration.
Okay. So, like this kind of re-internship, did this happen in other countries as well, in Guyana or in any other Southeast Asian country, or in within India? Because the internship system was very much active within India as well.
No. I mean, you see, when emigration started, they tried was first with the European people, but they did not work. Portuguese, Jewish, etc. Jewish stayed there, and then they tried with the Chinese people. Chinese went there, but then they remained for the other professions like opening the shops, etc., etc. Trade. The only Indians were interested in doing the field work in the sense of because they knew how to harvest, how to do the thing, so they were given lots of help, and that's why they became a very good rice cultivators. Cocoa, banana. There were so many products were there at that time, but Indians were like the best.
Okay, so like as the body of the coolies, the indentured laborers,
They
that
all were,
also very much became important in this
yeah, they
context.
all were called coolies, except the Europeans were not called coolies.
Okay, and sir, like, is there like this is a very racist situation? Like, if everyone is called coolies except for the Europeans, did this happen because of a certain incident or certain things? Anything happened, or it was because of inherent racism among the Europeans?
No, when the Indian, no, I think Europeans, they do not use the word coolie, but mostly the Britishers use the term coolie. Dutch also use the coolie because, after all, they learned the term coolie from the British administration in Calcutta, in other cities. So they use the word coolies. I mean, there have been like there was a ship went to South America, to Suriname, and it went to Helena, where the Napoleon Bonaparte was buried, and it is thought because Helena is very good for to get the fresh water and the fruits. And there was a Indian Bengali surgeon, even thinker he gives also, and he took some side for Indians that they should not be treated in a way what the ship, I think York was the ship, that they were treated. So the pilot became angry, and the Bengali family with his wife, he went there. They were put at that island, that you better stay here. You are not going to go to Caribbean area. And there was a big case going on, and but British felt that whatever they did was correct. Of course, he was sent back to Calcutta. So things that, I mean, if you look at, I think one has to go to the uh, India Office Library in London, and you can find out
Okay.
many correspondence papers, etc., etc., and that can give a lot of it. Like in Calcutta, you also have an archive. I don't know
Yes, sir.
how much. I don't know how much information one can have there, but you have to see the like you are working on police system, you have to have the district's head uh, city where the archives were kept. Maybe there you can also find out something.
Okay, sir. Yes, sir. And there is also the National Archives of Delhi. It's also they have some
Ah,
wonderful documents.
yeah, and I think Shimla should also have something.
Okay, IAS Shimla.
Hmm.
Okay, sir. And so also moving on to the next question, which is by Pratim as well. He is saying that also I have been reading recently one story which is about South Indian indentured laborer in Africa. Actually, we have been teaching this story to our students, and there I found an interesting thing, which is the class caste division. Though Indian indentured laborers worked often along with the Kafir or the quote unquote Kafir along with the African people, they hide their relationship with them despite being bound to them in a marital bond, or maybe they're just living partners. I can assume from the story that they do this for fear of being expelled from society, and I think he means the Hindu Orthodox society. I would like to know if the same thing exists in the Caribbean islands among Indian indentured laborers.
Question is very interesting, and this thing happens when there are the interracial marriages. And
Hmm.
within the interracial marriages, like for example, the Muslims can accept because they would convert the people into Islam. I mean, until now, I mean, in Netherlands, I know many people, and the Dutch girls, they got married, and then the problem started. And I said, well, you have all the rights here in this country. You can even divorce him. So, but that thing was not there at that time. Once you have become Muslim, then you remain a Muslim. Within the Hindu system was different. If Hindus are married to the Africans or Chinese, the question was from Hindus' point of view, they are not Hindu because they are having the blood of other people, which is not good and which was considered in terms of their descendants as the children. And that's why the children were not given any importance at that time. So I don't know whether you are asking in this line or some other line. I don't know, but
Uh,
I
I
think
think so.
more or less, African system was also the same. If you do marry, but the only thing was people could not become Hindu. That was out of question. Of course, I have seen in the Guyana, in other cities that, especially with the Kalimai temples, that the all the Africans come there and they even have learned the singing and the lyrics and the bhajans, etc. They do, but this is a very small group, very small. So the intermarriage question, I think you have to see, and on the other hand, the nationhood which the Indians are developing in these islands, they are island-based nationalism. It is nothing to do with India. It is nothing to do with the Caribbean.
Okay. That's a very amazing insight like you told us right now. And like from your talk, we have also deduced the way you have spoken about the indentured laborers. Now the system totally varies from countries to countries. That is really very informative. I know this will help many of us researchers who are working on indentured laborers a lot in the coming future. And we don't have any more questions from the audience. But to our participants, if you have any questions, feel free to drop these questions or comments in the chat box. We'll surely convey them to Professor Gautam so that you can have a discussion later on. And thank you, sir, for this amazing lecture. And before handing over the mic to Pratim, I just like to ask one thing, like. So as like many of us were working on coolie literature or maybe the coolie system, indentured laborers, the present generation, like what I've found from my own fieldwork or archival or interview, like people interviewing people, I found out that the present generation of indentured laborers, the descendants of indentured laborers, they don't like to be called coolies, and some of them don't even accept that they have migration has taken place. So how as researchers we address these points? Like, we have to talk about the migration and the term fully. We have to use them. So how do we solve this dilemma?
No, I mean, kuli is a different term. It has many meaning, and within India also at the time, if you look at the when the tribals went to Guyana or to Mauritius, they are sometimes called the Dhangar. And Dhangar is a name given to the Orao tribe as a servant. And I know I have many friends also. They are even professors, and they tell me, Gautamji, don't use this word Dhangar. So it became a derogatory concept. So I think, I mean, even like primitives, I always say don't use the word primitive, better use the term Orang, Santhal, Munda, whatever it is. That would be better. So I think anthropologists, social scientists have to look at from that point of view. A Kuli idea, a Kuli concept has been different, but I think you have to look at the Kuli system in modern times nowadays. I mean, Kuli has become a myth. It was a
Okay.
story they would tell that, we were brought there, we were asked to do this thing, and then so we were all the time called coolies. But coolies have become a myth in the sense that when you talk to the elderly people, they say, yes, yes, I do remember my father or my grandfather used to tell me that we were called coolies. And we never liked it. But the question is, we could not oppose it. We could not say anything. So, what I'm trying to tell to our new students, if they want to do something on police system, then they have to look at from the points of view of the areas where they are working. Now, secondly, try to develop some ideas to intervene, not intervene, to have elderly people. That I want to say, because they might be having some stories from their parents or forefathers, and in which way they defined the kudi. Now, one thing I want to tell you here, which I did not say, the question is of methodology. Methodology is not only the talking, it's not only just the noting down the thing, it is just not the same like Malinowski and Dr. Brown said, participant observation. I think sometimes a structural point of view, you have to develop a cognitive approach. What person thinks, sometimes he does not say. He only says when the time comes. So you try to develop that idea, and that idea you cannot develop. You have to be friends, and for a couple of weeks you need not to do anything. Just listen, and then once you have listened, then you have found out what he or she wanted to say. That is the cognitive approach that gives the real picture, and there they can say how much we differ, to use the word fully, and which way they would like to explain it. And that is the way to do the research. I mean, I do with the cognitive way. I always use the word cognitive.
Thank you, sir, for this amazing this advice. I think very helpful for researchers like us who are trying to work on the indentured labor system.
And I would like
And
to thank you, both of you, and all our listeners. If they have some problems, if they want to do something, they can ask you, and I would always be helpful to help them, because new ideas should come. And when there are new ideas, then we can create concepts, we can create theories, we can do many things. Thank you
Yes,
very much.
sir. Absolutely. And also thanks to Dr. Naresh Kumar sir for initiating this contact between you and us. Thanks to Dr. Naresh Kumar as well. And thank you, Professor Gautam, for joining us today. And we also have personally, I also have many other questions, but most this session more. We'll just ask you later on, discuss this later on. We'll continue this conversation. And now I will invite Protein back to deliver the concluding portion, the concluding part, the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Aratrika. So, on behalf of Team Calcutta Comparatists 1919 and its members, I would like to convey our hearty thanks to Professor Gautam for his excellent lecture on Indian diaspora on Caribbean. A big thank you, Professor, for sharing your ideas and views on this area. And I would like to express our sincere gratitude to you and also our patron, Dr. Minmay Pramanik and Abhinav Moitra, for enabling us to host this platform and organize such lectures and all. Um, so thank you to our audience on YouTube being with us today. Hope we officially now conclude this session. Good day to all and good night to everyone.
Thank you
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you.
Have you recorded this whole thing?
Yes, Professor.
Yes, sir.
No,
Yes, sir.
because
Pratim, please end this broadcast now. And good night to all our participants.
no,